what is mental health?
Mental health, I suppose, is different for different people. We tend to think of mental health as a problem.
See, because that's what I would think. I need to go talk to someone first before going ahead and self-medicating myself to think that this is how I'm going to feel better.
100% advised.
Gabby would have stopped me, but Gabby wasn't around.
Not self-medicating in any capacity. Oh, sleep is
everything.
Sleep affects everything.
Right.
Even if you don't sleep enough, the next day, it can exasperate your anxiety. It can make you hungrier.
Can make you more hungry?
Absolutely.
Why is it that my husband has like narcolepsy and he eats like so much? Hi guys, welcome back to my channel here at Let's Be Real with Ase Wang. Today I have a really special guest as we're going to be focusing on mental health. Today I have here with me Dr. Gabrielle Tüscher, a clinical psychologist, which is also AKA a good friend of mine. Hi, Gabby.
Hi, Ase. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you here because I know that there's so many people out there talking about mental health. So this is the reason why you're on the second EP, because I felt that this is something that we all struggle with every day. Some of us don't like to admit it, but the truth is a lot of us actually do suffer from a mental health problem, but we're not aware of it. So I just wanted to start off the EP maybe with you going a bit more in depth about what it is that you do.
Okay, so as you mentioned.
This is so bizarre.
I know.
Because I'd just like to say that Gabby does not treat me. She's not my therapist, which you can't be my therapist.
I couldn't be your therapist.
Yeah.
Ethically, that would be wrong. But also probably wouldn't listen to anything that I would tell her to do. So
because we're friends. So yeah, I just want to put it out there that Gabby does not treat me, but she is a doctor and she has very wise words. So yeah, going back to you, what exactly is it how would you explain in depth what it is that you do?
So I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm also a licensed eating disorder specialist. And a lot of my work is trauma focused. Mm-hmm. So I work with adolescents, young adults as well. I'm also a registered dietitian, which I pull into the space with obviously the eating disorder cases with the young people. And I've been doing this for 24 years.
So crazy.
I know. And I love helping people and working with different individuals and seeing them grow through their struggles and coming out on the other side, especially the young kids, because these days things are just so difficult.
People just can't prepare you, no matter what people say, that you go through so many different stages in your life, and each stage that you go through, you're going to have a different set of problems. And it really is, it can be overwhelming.
It's hard to be young now. When I grew up, there was no social media, internet. Yep. So everybody, the young kids, but as well as adults, are being exposed to this on a continuous basis. And it's really difficult to switch off when you're dealing with your own issues, far less being exposed to like what other people are potentially going through.
Well, social media is something else that we're going to get into at some point with you. But I just wanted to get as well a sense of when people say mental health, like what exactly, I know there are many different categories of mental health, but if you were to sum it up, what is mental health?
Mental health, I suppose, is different for different people. We tend to think of mental health as a problem.
See, because that's what I would think.
Right. But people don't understand that taking care of your mental health is an important part of being, a human being, right? So how we take care of our mind, how we take care of our body. And a lot of people sometimes don't go to therapy because they have a problem. Yeah. They tend to think of therapy as a thing that you go in because you're struggling with something. But a lot of people could actually benefit from going to therapy to work on themselves, because it's like you go to the gym or you go out for a nice meal. For some people, going to therapy, it's actually like it's it's part of their routine to better themselves and take care of, how they think and how they feel and how they approach things in life or growing as a person.
Well, I always say to my friends, because I was, should I go to therapy? And I'm like, yeah, why not? Like, why is that looked upon as such a bad thing? And I have the same almost philosophy with like working out. It's like, just as how you sleep and you eat, you should be working out. It should just be part of your routine as how you grow. And I just feel like with therapy too, it's not necessarily such a bad thing. And you just got to put that into your lifestyle and not look at it so negatively.
Right.
But it's true.
That stigma that's put on it that, if you go to therapy, there must be something wrong with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also what I tell a lot of times with my patients that actually come in with a problem, when they go into like a crisis space, if you're constantly trying to fix the crisis, you never actually work on the person and you actually don't ever get to a space where you're okay. Because you're always trying to plug in those holes, right? That you can't actually get anywhere. I just rambled about.
No, it totally makes sense. Because I feel also with therapy is that it's not something that you can do once or twice and be like, okay, I'm fixed. I went to therapy. Everything's great. And let's just move on. It is, and this is something that I have to say I struggle with too, because I have been a victim of, going to therapy and then being like, everything's great now. The problem's resolved. I feel so much better. And then I'll cruise for a few months. And then I realize that, no, I'm not okay. And I should have committed. And I think that's like a thing that most people tend to lack of, and including myself, is the commitment to going to see your therapist. What do you see most clients suffer from these days?
Well, I think mental health is a broad term. So that's like we're taking care of the overall the overall person, right? So when somebody comes in for something specific, it tends to be like a specific disorder. So like, for example, anxiety, right? Anxiety can be generalized anxiety disorder. Or a big one also, especially, it can be adults, it can be kids, is social anxiety disorder, right? So that's a mental health. That's about mental health. Okay. But that's a specific issue that somebody's coming in with, right?
So you say most people that you see would be suffering from a lot of anxiety.
I get quite a mix. So obviously in the eating disorder world, I see a lot in kids from the age of as young as 8 to, 17, 15, 13, all the way up until, they're in their early 20s and some adults. But what is particularly common now is a lot with eating disorders in kids, anorexia, bulimia, and other eating disorders. But it's not just whereas, say, 20 years ago, they would come in with that specific problem. Now they're coming in with co-occurring disorders. So that's what I mean by that is, so if somebody comes with anorexia and they're not eating, they've also got obsessive compulsive disorder. They've also got anxiety. They've got depression. So it's a combination of things.
It goes hand in hand.
Correct. So a lot of times people are coming in with, they might think they're coming in for one thing. So I'm very anxious. And then and then as you go into it, they might also be suffering from depression or marital issues or relationship issues. And so as you dig further into it.
I feel like, that was also like throwing myself under the bus here was also something that I realized by going to therapy was that I went in for anxiety. And I just felt, why do I feel so anxious? Like I'm anxious before I go to sleep. I'm anxious when I wake up. I'm overthinking everything and I'm tired. So I went to therapy and I sat down with my thoughts and my feelings with my therapist. And I realized it's not just the anxiety, because the anxiety comes from something. And it went back into a lot of the other things that caused the anxiety. I feel like, it definitely goes hand in hand. And anxiety is something that I always hear people say, oh, I've got so much anxiety. Another one is depression. So you would say that...
One thing I wanted to ask you is like, you talk about anxiety, right? Do you ever notice that sometimes
Yes.
when you're anxious and you actually don't know why,
Yes.
right? So you don't know why and you're
Yeah.
thinking, well, nothing's happened. So why am I feeling this
My
way?
heart palpitates sometimes. And then it could just be in the middle of anything. Like I could just be driving. There's absolutely no reason. All of a sudden my heart will just start beating really fast. And then I'm like, ooh, what's happening?
So it's important, I think, for people to understand too. It's like, it doesn't have to be something specifically that connects to it. That anxiety could be coming from something that happened a week ago, a couple of months ago, right? Which hasn't been resolved and it's just bubbling underneath. And so instead of like it needing to connect to something where it's important that people just, okay, I don't know why, and recognizing I feel this way.
Yeah.
But you don't always have to have an answer, right? So that also allows you to open up to explore it more when you're able to. So for example, if you go see your therapist and you have that time to, recognize, I don't know why I feel this way.
Well, my anxiety has gotten a lot worse with age. And I don't know if that's, I'm actually, maybe it could be because with age, I have more responsibilities. I have a daughter now. And so, being a mother definitely amped up my anxiety. But I'm sure every mother kind of feels like that.
It's very common.
Yeah. So that's when I have to pull myself back and be like, okay, look, you're not the only mother on earth. And every mother probably has this anxiety.
Well, you're responsible for somebody else instead of just yourself, right?
Yeah. And some people are could be responsible for, like our parents or, a whole bunch of people. So I can understand that anxiety. What is the difference between feeling anxious and depressed? Because for me, when I think depressed, I think, well, if you're depressed and you can't get out of bed and you lose interest in things that you love doing, for me, I feel like that is what that's how I would feel depressed. And then if I'm anxious, I would feel like my heart's palpitating and I'm constantly just overthinking things and I'm spiraling. But what actually is the difference with
anxiety and depression? Don't have to go hand in hand.
Oh, they don't?
No.
Okay.
No. For some people, but for others, they suffer from anxiety, but they're never depressed.
Okay.
So I think that's the misconception that a lot of people, in order for you to be depressed, you have to not be able to get out of bed, not be able to brush your hair or like basic self-care, and always being very negative and very down. But a lot of people are depressed and they actually don't realize it.
I was going to say.
Yeah. So it can be even subtle lack of motivation of like not wanting to see your friends as often because you're going through a lot and isolating or making excuses.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Like, what are the signs of being depressed?
Yeah, like wanting to sleep more. But I don't mean that in a sense of like you can't get out of bed, right? But it's just like some people who wake up and it's like, oh, you feel I don't want to deal with my day or what's coming forward, or I've got a lot on my plate that I'm extremely stressed about. I don't have that motivation to do it. Doing your basic tasks and just not having any form of happiness in it, or feeling that you're motivated or you lose interest in things, right? So it doesn't have to be an extreme space, but very subtle where people start to withdraw or they start, it can be as I think when we hear about, it's a topic that a lot of people don't want to talk about, but which is a big topic now that's a problem is
right.
So a lot of times you'll hear these stories on the news of a young girl or boy in their 18, 20s that have they have all a life, right? They have lots of friends, are super popular. Maybe they're financially secure.
Right.
They're beautiful or, good looking and good in sports and all of these things. And that person takes their life. And then they say, but why? That they had everything. So a lot of people who on the outside seem to have everything don't feel like they can share that they are depressed.
Do you think it's because maybe also they might feel embarrassed to share that they're feeling depressed because they feel like they have everything, but yet they're not happy?
Correct. So a lot of people, it's like they're constant. So let's say that's me, and I say to you, also, I really don't like myself, and I'm really not happy. And you're like, stop! Like
you have everything.
You have the best life. You've got all of these things. You're very successful.
Nothing to worry about.
And so that dismisses how I feel. So then I feel like I can't say that I'm not okay because I'm supposed to be.
Right.
Right. So then that sort of thing starts to brew in silence, and people don't feel like they can talk about it because they constantly get that reaction.
And they probably feel ashamed too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that is something that we just don't want to undermine at all when people say, and I think we've all learned that during time with all the social pressures too. If someone's saying they're not feeling good, then that's something that we're not going to take lightly. And I feel like there's definitely been a lot more awareness about it now, but sadly that awareness has come with too many problems that have happened. And we've seen, like you said, side and, in younger people too. So that is very depressing as well. But I think, when friends, this is the one thing I always say to my friends when they're like, I'm not feeling good. And I had a friend that called me not too long ago and was, I just don't feel well. I feel like when I wake up, I'm angry. And I was like, you know what? I mean, go to therapy. Like, let's not make this a big deal. Like, it's really not. It's like, just go to therapy and like lay out your feelings and go, at least try.
I like to always think about it's like, it's okay not to be okay.
100%. 100%. But I also understand that sometimes you do feel ashamed because I'm also in that point sometimes where I'm like, God, what am I complaining about? Like I feel like I have a good life, and this and that. But then I'm like, I catch myself and I'm like, it's okay if I'm not okay. It's okay. And I'll go and I'll go to my therapy and I'll try to do the work that I can do. At what point do you think that somebody needs to get help?
Again, this varies for different people, but obviously if it's something very extreme where it's impacting their life on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, if your child is struggling with bullying or
God, I hope that never becomes an issue.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic. Where or they're afraid to go to school, or that's a specific, direct, immediate space where somebody needs to go in and get help. But also, it's like it can be subtle signs, right? So if you're feeling you're having difficulty communicating to your loved ones, or you start to see yourself withdrawing, or the anxiety comes to a point where you can't control it, like you can't sleep, you can't you can't function the way that you're usually doing. I think at that point, it's even okay to reach out to somebody and say, I'm not sure if this is something that I need to do, but I don't feel that I'm myself and I've got some stuff that I'm not managing my stress properly, or I'm noticing things. And you can go in there and explore it to see if like, okay, is this just me being in a space where I just need to talk to somebody?
Yeah.
Or is it something that I actually need, I haven't dealt with, or something that's new that I need to start working on?
Yeah. I think it's really hard to also kind of, it is hard to figure it out by yourself, because it's like what you said, sometimes you don't know what the underlying problem is. And by going and seeing somebody, they just kind of are able to, I don't want to use the word dig it out of you, but put you in a place where you feel safe to be able to be like, okay, well, this was my life and this and this. And it's almost like then it feels almost a bit nice to hear it from someone else, a complete outsider that doesn't know anything, be like, oh, well, this could have been why this happened.
Right. Well, it's because the therapist is a neutral space.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't have an emotional attachment to the person, which is why therapists can't treat their friends, because we have an emotional attachment, right?
Thank God for that.
I know, right? So that becomes a space where you can't talk to the people that you love, and they can support you in a different way, but it gives you a whole other perspective of looking at what is potentially the problem or what you're going through and how to
a lot less embarrassing to talk to someone that you don't know about your problems versus somebody that you would know. I mean, talking to your friends is great. I understand that. And it's good to have a network where you can be able to talk to your friends, which we'll talk about in a bit. But there's some things as well that you just don't feel comfortable sharing with your friends that I personally found. I mean, again, everyone's different. That I found very comforting just talking to somebody that I trust, but I don't know about problems, that wouldn't be like, oh, it's fine. You'll wake up tomorrow and you'll be fine. Because I've been guilty of doing that too sometimes with my friends. I'm like, okay, we'll sleep on it. And then, but then I'm like, no, maybe.
But maybe like something like that, a response is like, that's dismissive.
See,
right?
So now you learn that when your friends are telling you something, maybe it's not okay to say you'll be fine.
Because it's our natural instinct to fix it and make that person feel better, right? It's like, oh no, you're going to be okay. Like tomorrow, everything's... So it's our natural instinct to be supportive and try to fix it, but you don't need to fix it. You can just be there and support and listen. And, I don't know how to help you, but I'm here for you. And if you need me, like, be there. So then they feel like they can unload on you and you're not judging or you're not trying to say that it's not important.
Right. I have one friend, and I always know this about her, is that actually it's two friends that have done this. When I've spoken about something that I'm, bothered about, or I'm not feeling good, they would always say, well, how should we fix it? Or like, what should we do? And I was like, just those simple words of like, well, okay, how can we make you feel better? Or what should we do to help this? And I was like, wow, that's such a nice way to put it. And I remember these two friends, which I'm still very close to them. It just made me feel like, wow, it's like we're a team, And then here I am having made those mistakes before, to friends going, it's okay, sleep on it and we'll talk about it tomorrow. And I'm like, okay. Like, so it's all been a learning process. Going to therapy has also actually taught me how to deal with other people when they have problems and not be dismissive about it. Talking about sleep, because you were talking about not sleeping enough. And I remember we went to go to my dentist.
The dentist, yeah.
Not to throw my dentist under the bus here, but he doesn't sleep. And I mean, he was just asking a simple question like, I have problems sleeping, which I have problems sleeping. I think a lot of us have issues. Some people don't. Like John has 0 issues sleeping. In fact, I think he has like narcolepsy. But like, a lot of my friends are like, oh, I was thinking too much and I couldn't sleep, or they don't get proper sleep. And I know that when I don't get enough sleep, I could literally be depressed from it.
Oh, sleep is
everything.
Sleep affects everything.
Right.
Even if you don't sleep enough, the next day, it can exacerbate your anxiety. It can make you hungrier. So you end up eating worse.
It can make you more hungry?
Absolutely. They've actually done studies that people who get less sleep are actually heavier than people that don't.
Why is it that my husband has like narcolepsy and he eats like so much? Sorry, baby.
Yeah. So that's something that's, something that people don't actually realize is the number one thing that's important is sleep. So I make sure I get at least, I can't function on less than 8. So it goes from 8 to 10.
Are you supposed to clock in 8 hours? Is that what?
8 hours is ideal. Some people can function better on 7 or.
I'm functioning on 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not much.
It's not.
No.
But anything less than 6, I'm a hot mess. I'm a hot mess anyway without the 6, but but I need at least 6 to be able to go to work and like know what I'm doing.
But even 6 is not enough.
But that's going back to what I was saying. It's like, how do you lay down your anxiety or your stress from that day? Because I mean, we're all stressed. Today's life, social media, everything, especially kids, we're all bearing a lot of stress, I feel, more so than maybe what our parents did back in the day. Not that I want to undermine what they went through, but how do you shut off at the end of the day? Because I know this is something that we were talking about with my dentist too. And it's like, how do you not bring your work home with you? How do you not bring your problems with you to sleep? It sounds like just don't bring your problems into bed and just go to sleep. But it's also the hardest thing to do.
Right, because that's your quiet time, right? It's like this is the time when everything, you don't have to deal with stuff. But when you lay down and you're carrying all of that stuff, that's when I think was something that we had mentioned when we were speaking to him is like, I call it the little devil that shows up at the end of the
That's
bed.
Right.
He's like,
I remember that.
Hey, remember me? And then it's a barrage of all the stuff that, you know, has been happening, going on in your worries. And that creates more anxiety and stresses the body and your mind can't switch off.
How do you stop spiraling?
Well, I think a lot of times people just, you know, after their day, whether it's, you know, working or you're taking care of your kids or, and you immediately go from like all of these activities, emails, you know, watching the news, things that are stressful, and then they try to go straight to sleep. And there's no way you can sleep when you're not in already preparing yourself for a relaxed state, right? So things like just little things like turning off your emails, you know, by a certain point where you're not constantly checking, right? Or scrolling on your phone.
Which we're all guilty of doing.
Right, because that's activating your mind, right? So taking the time to have, you know, whether it's half an hour before you go to bed or it's an hour, some people need more to decompress, whether that's like taking a bath or, you know, it sounds silly.
Xanax.
Yeah, that's for you to talk with your therapist about. But it's a part that you have to remember and recognize that sleep is not the time to deal with the problems because you can't, right? So even when it's in that place of but I need to do this and I need to do that, it's like, okay, well, telling yourself now is not the time for me to be doing all of that.
Which is the hardest thing to do.
Which is the hardest thing to do. But it's like, I have no control over it. All I control is the present, right? What's going to happen in the future? That's what creates anxiety is because you're running forward, right?
So it's essentially battling this little devil that you have on the shoulder.
Correct. Yeah. And like a remote control, turning him off, right? It's like I can turn you back on tomorrow and we can have that chat tomorrow and deal with whatever it is, right? But you're not going to be able to, you know, get that meeting done any better at 1 o'clock in the morning when the meeting's at 9 a.m., right?
I guess it's just like rationalizing with yourself too, how you want to do this. I mean, I've banned all computers and phones in the bedroom. And it's really just for that reason of we need to stop because it literally got to a point where me and John would be in our bed, the TV's on, he's on his computer, I'm on my phone scrolling. And I was like, I mean, I had a lot of fun doing it. And I struggle with putting my phone down because I am addicted to my phone. I know that. And it's disgusting when when it pops up on how many hours you've used a day, I'm like, So I'm trying to work on that. And I put a ban in the bedroom now where I charge my phone across the room. So if I ever want to look at my phone, I have to get my ass out of bed, which I don't want to do because sometimes I'm so cozy and I'm just like, oh, do I want to go all the way? And then you might hear I never turn it to silent just in case there's an emergency, but I might hear like a ding. And then I'm like, nope, not getting out of bed to check that because I'm too lazy. And that works for me. I don't know, other people put it in the other room, which I think is great. John still struggles with not bringing his computer into bed. And so I constantly have to police and be like, get the computer out. And I feel like that already has just helped a little bit. I do spiral sometimes where I'm like yesterday, I was guilty of the scrolling in the bed. And then I had to stop myself and be like, put the phone down, you know? So, and I think just that, taking that small step already is, I mean, John, he has narcolepsy anyway, so it doesn't matter. But putting the phone away was a huge thing for me. And I think, I mean, even if I'm just getting 6 hours of sleep, like I put everything away. but it's so hard. I still wake up sometimes going, oh my God, I have like 5 emails to reply, and then I spiral, you know?
Also, like if you allow yourself to have spaces where it's like, okay, between this time or after a certain time, I don't look at my emails, or for people who are sensitive to, let's say, the news, when news is coming at you all the time,
I
right?
can't watch the news at night. That gives me way too much anxiety.
Even during the day, right? Because some people actually I have some kids who are really anxious about receiving an email. So they'll avoid it at all costs. And because they're afraid of what might be coming in there and how to respond to it. And so we designate times for them to do that. So it's like, okay, between this time and this time is when you'll go and check it, and then you leave it. And it's the same with the news, right? Because usually the news is negative stuff that's being fed all the time.
Right.
And that can be quite stressful for people on top of your daily life. And so with something like that, it's like, okay, I'll only watch the news for half an hour or check, you know, whether it's on the television or it's on your phone.
Right.
And then I put it down and I'm not going to look at it until the same time tomorrow. So you actually have control over what comes to you,
what information you're absorbing,
information you're receiving, and when you're receiving it versus it's like pinging at you left, right, and center.
I think, that is, again, like the easiest thing to say, but also the hardest thing to do. And I think it's even harder now when we have social media. So let's talk a little bit about the stresses and anxiety and what, with social media. I think, if you think about it, going back, because we're old enough to go back to before there was Instagram. I think we had like MySpace or something. I don't even know what we had back then. But I was actually sleeping a lot better. And with Instagram, I mean, all it takes sometimes for me is to see something I don't want to see. And then it's like, I'm thinking about that. Do you feel a lot of people are suffering from, social anxiety or just trying to be a certain way from like social media? I mean, we know the answer to that.
100%.
And I spoke about this in my last EP where I'm, we're guilty, especially moms, scrolling, being, oh, she looks good. Oh, wow. Like she looks fabulous. And then you start, oh, well, this wasn't the same. How do you stop that little devil on your shoulder and try to pull yourself back? Well, I mean, the easy thing would be just not to get on social media, right? But can we do that?
Well, until you can actually learn how to distance yourself from something like that. And of course, like some people like yourself, where this is part of your job.
Yeah.
And you can't do that, right? So you really have to create spaces where you are have protective boundaries so that this doesn't have that same sort of impact on you. But I think a lot of times when we approach it in a space where don't go to it when you're feeling vulnerable, right? Because it's like a little bit like when you get broken up with, right?
And you start psycho stalking. Yeah.
And also like you would listen to sad songs and it would just make you feel worse, but you know exactly what you're doing. It's the same thing with the internet.
Speaking of songs, that's what I used to do at work. Whenever they would be like a scene where I would like have to cry or feel emotional, I'd be like, give me a second. And I'd go listen to a super sad song. And then that would put me in the place of like where I don't want to be personally, but where I would have to be for work. So I guess, it's
you start looking at, accounts of, I don't know, like people who have perfect bodies and look like, they're on holiday, skiing in the Alps or whatever it is. And their life, obviously on social media, people don't put the reality. They put the best versions of themselves, right?
Right.
So, I mean, more so the kids where they take 150 pictures of themselves and then they go back and they filter down and then they filter that picture. And then by the time they post it, it's taken them,
Well, here's why I think it's really unhealthy too, because then there are those extreme people that will post the most manic, depressing stuff too, where if I'm not feeling good and I happen to be scrolling through that and then I see something and it will just trigger me, where I feel like now it just goes, people are just putting up any kind of content, like anything, whether it's like the perfect life. And then you've got the ones that are posting that are just so negative and so dark. And sometimes I'll hit and I'll scroll and be like, oh, didn't want to see that. And that just took me back to like where I didn't want to be.
Yeah, or the comments, right?
The
it's
comments.
Like people are brutal.
They are
on
brutal.
Spaces like this that it's horrendous. And they think that they know you, right? But they have no idea what's going on in your life, but they have an opinion on it. And they're not afraid to put their opinion out there, especially if you're in a public
Well, it's bullying. I feel like you don't have to go to school or to work or to leave your house to get bullied now. All you need is your phone or any kind of social media. And I mean, I don't know what the percent is, but I'm sure it's more than half of people that go on and look at stuff that they go look at their comments. I'm sure there might be a negative comment because not everyone has the same take.
But also, this was actually a topic that came up with, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but Netflix came out with a show called Adolescence.
Yes.
So that has like become the number one show for Netflix.
I didn't watch the ending, so don't ruin it for me.
Okay.
But it is the one with the child.
Yes.
The one where they shoot everything in one take,
Correct.
right?
And so
you can say the premise of it. Don't say the ending for those that haven't watched it.
So basically, this was done in a space of where we're hearing about like Andrew Tate, the man who is bringing up misogyny for kids and like against females and all this sort of stuff. I won't get into it, but so it's on the premise of like when kids are bullied, but you actually don't realize, well, parents don't realize that they're being bullied. And that goes to an extreme where this boy kills the girl who was bullying him, right? A 13-year-old boy.
Which has happened in real life many times.
Which is what brought the director and the actor to do this. And so what they didn't understand too is like a lot of the comments that this girl was putting on his Instagram, was emojis of like, a purple heart means something else versus what you would anticipate what you interpret it to be, right? Whereas it's a message and the kids have their own dialogue. They don't even have to say anything, but everybody knows all the other kids know what they're doing and they latch onto it. So the bullying is much more complicated than it used to be, right? And so this is happening in your house.
Yeah.
Your child is in their bedroom and they're being bullied and you have no idea because you don't understand it.
Breaks my heart.
It's the kids I see who have gone through bullying on different extremes, or they're in a space where they have no friends, or people are, using the relationship, which often girls do when they're young, sometimes adults as well, that they use it as a weapon against somebody. And these kids are incredible. I mean, to the point that if I was their age, it's like, I would be your friend, right?
Yeah.
But they're treated so badly either you could be because of the way you look, where you don't fit in, or you could be too pretty. I mean, back in the day, if you were pretty, you were popular. Now, if you're too pretty, you're a threat.
Well, I feel like everyone's getting bullied these days. And it could be any age, size, height, wealth, not wealthy, whatever. You're being bullied. If you go down the comment section, you're gonna find a comment, and I've been guilty of doing that too.
Yeah,
and
whereas like when we were young, if you were bullied at school, it was left at school. And then you could come home and you have your safe space.
Only get bullied physically, really, by meeting the person or over the phone, which then you would probably hang up.
Right.
Now it's like, how do you hang up? Like you can't really hang up, can you? You can't press that off button because social media is everywhere. It's become people's work. It's become people's life now. And that I think it's so scary.
And another part of it too is like, which I don't think a lot of people realize, like, especially with the teenagers, they'll be like, okay, so my friend is bullying me. Why are they bullying you? What makes you think they're bullying you? And it's like, oh, well, look, they posted this picture of them at, a birthday party or something.
Right.
And it's like, that was intentional. And a parent will say, no, it's not. They're just taking a picture of them at the birthday party. It's like, no, because they know I wasn't invited and they intentionally put the three of them together so that I would see it. And they're not lying. It's true. Because this is how calculated it has become.
I feel like we've all kind of been there, myself included, where I've seen stuff and it would just be to just press a button on me, whether it was an ex-boyfriend that wanted to post this picture to make me feel upset, or it was whether, same thing of like, oh no, I wasn't invited to this event, but all these people are posting, which is not directed at me, but I can't help but to feel bad from it.
Yeah.
Like why wasn't I invited? So I feel like it really doesn't matter what age, size, wealthy or not wealthy, anyone can be a target at this point. Sadly, kids are a target, which is completely unbaffling to me. But I think going back to what you're saying as well with that is, let's talk a little bit about circle of friends and support team, whether it's family or friends, which, I mean, I personally think it's a huge thing when it comes to your mental health, is surrounding yourself with good people. And me and Gabby, I'm going to call Dr. Gabrielle, go way back, way back. I think we've known each other for 20 years or... We've been out, we've seen a lot of things in life. And I was thinking about this today and I was like, oh, I remember those days of, when we went out and we've all been guilty of hanging out with like the wrong people and like, the right people and the wrong people. And how easy it was for me, especially, to have gone down a really dark rabbit hole of hanging out with like the wrong kinds of people. What is your advice or suggestions on surrounding yourself with the right kind of people? Obviously, people that don't say, you'll be fine. We've all learned something here today.
But that's good intention.
You're not fine when you say you're not fine.
That's a good intention, right? But the one thing I say is know your worth.
Right.
Because I think when we're younger, we're out of school and everything, friends are everything, right? You start developing yourself as you get older. And with that comes self-confidence, right? So a lot of people who are potentially not very secure with themselves tend to either, they could be people pleasers, or they want to fit into a certain crowd or, have particular friendships. But versus it's like they are allowing the people to choose them versus them being in the position to choose who they want into their space.
That's interesting.
Right? So that's a lesson we learn as we get, hopefully we get as we get older.
Which, by the way, we could still be learning. I still learn this every day.
100%. And we have all gone through those experiences of people that we have let into our space that either were not meant to be there in the first place, or you changed as a person and that person didn't change with you.
Right.
Right. And this is how we learn about what we need. So if we come from a me space of like, what kind of people do I want in my life? So
I think that's where you can be selfish, guys.
100%.
Yeah.
Because if you're always in a space of like doing, being somebody else to match somebody, you will never be happy in yourself, right? And also when there's a lot of drama or toxicity where somebody is choosing a space that's very, is unhealthy, that also has a serious impact on the people trying to support them.
Yeah.
And there comes a point too where you potentially have to cut those ties because it is extremely painful and you're trying to help somebody, but they won't help themselves.
I also want to add that it could take years or days, or like there's no time limit to certain things. And if there's anything that, maybe since I got married and had kids, it's not till I moved on to another phase of my life that I realized that, okay, these are the lifers that I'm going to keep and that deserve. I use the word deserve now because I'm coming from like a selfish point where you deserve to be in my life because, we lift each other up. And, even when we're down, it's like you're still there. And on this phase of my life, I've had to boot so many people out, but it took years to figure out that this person deserves a seat at my table and this person does not deserve a seat at my table. And it took a lot of people pleasing because I mean, coming from entertainment industry, that's all you do is you just people please. And it got to a point where I'm like, okay, maybe at work sometimes you have to people please, but do you want to go home and people please too with your friends? And, so I had to cut out so many friends that I felt were sucking the life out of me. And it was the hardest thing to do. And it's almost like a breakup.
It's extreme. It's more painful than a breakup.
It is because then you also think about how much you gave them and how much time and effort you put into these people and that left you feeling like this. But I'm telling you, it was the most rewarding when I finally realized that I've had enough. And I've always said to myself, and I always say this with my friends too, when they're contemplating, should I still be friends with this person or should I still be with this person? Should I still date this person? Should I still be married with this person? You'll know when you've had enough eventually. And maybe it just took me a few years, but booting them out was like the best decision of my life.
Well, you feel that after is what you experience, and then it's the realization after how much energy it took. And relationships, friendships should not be something that drains you. It should be adding into your space, right? And adding value to your life of the things that are important to you and what that person adds to you, right? So I think it's the perspective of how we look at friendships versus like what they want. If you're coming from a they perspective, you will never have the same type of relationship you actually want. It has to come from an I perspective.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, family sometimes too. I mean, let's be real. Not everyone's family is functional. I mean, we all have our problems in our families. And I think, sometimes it's not just your friends, but it's also family, right? And how do you create that healthy space? Because I think with family, it's a little bit harder.
Well, because there's a stigma that, not stigma, there's an expectation that like family is supposed to be, because they're family, you have to do everything, that another person is asking of you or whatnot. But it's very important to have boundaries in your family as well.
Right.
Because you can love a family member, but you don't have to like them. Right? It's like a lot of times I get this with people, they have that conflict. It's like, but if I say something negatively or this person has done something to me and then they try to rationalize it, but I love them. I said, but of course you love them because they're your blood, but it doesn't mean you have to like them. And it doesn't mean you have to tolerate how they are treating you, right? So for a lot of people, I mean, familial dysfunction is a huge problem.
Yeah. I feel like more so maybe than friends.
100%, which is why a lot of times when somebody can't get what they need from the family, the friends become the family unit because they are the chosen ones. You can't choose your family, right? So, but you can also create healthy boundaries so that you're respecting yourself as to what you're able to tolerate as well and what kind of support you need or can provide without, and for some people that actually requires closing the door. Right. And they say, well, how could you not ever speak to your father again? It's like, well, if the father has created a space for you that is destructive, and that could be physically, that could be emotionally, that could, why should you tolerate that just because they're your parent? Right? It's like you're choosing yourself and those boundaries. And sometimes it requires cutting off a relationship. And obviously that's in an extreme case, but that it becomes something that it's to save yourself.
Right.
And nobody can judge that unless you are in that person's shoes. Right?
Right. Yeah. It's families is not something that you can choose. So I feel like, I guess it works the same way with friends. It's like, I always say this. It's like, okay, I respect your decision. This is for friends. I respect your decision, but it doesn't mean I have to like it, but I'm going to respect it, and there have been a few cases like that in friendship where I'm like, all right, probably wouldn't have done that, but I'm going to respect it, but I don't like it. I want to talk a little bit too about, not too much in depth, but when people are not feeling well and they go and get help, I know, and this is I don't know if this is something in Asia or if this is just genuinely, people are really scared, meaning like, okay, I don't want to go see a therapist because they're going to put me on antidepressants and I don't want to take medicine. I hear that a lot here in Asia.
Okay.
And I want to talk a bit about that because I feel like there's a stigma around that of like, no, I don't want to take medication. But I want to put it out there that I go see a therapist and I didn't go into my therapist's office and my therapist went, well, okay, you're feeling like this. You got to go take medication and you're going to feel better. Because I kind of want to correct what people out there think about this. Because I had so many friends who are like, no, if I go see a therapist, they're going to put me on medication. And I'm like, it's not like that. You have to go in there. You're going to talk about it. That's like, for me, I feel like the last resort. You're going in there to fix yourself first before any of that takes place. What is your advice or what can you say about the stigma around that?
Well, I think if somebody was to do that, like to go in and the first thing the therapist is like, you need to be on medication.
I would change therapist.
I would.
Change your therapist.
100%.
Guys. Yeah.
Because that's not the prime solution. It's very different if you're talking about somebody who's manic or they are massive depressive or they are schizophrenic, right? Those are spaces that it's not really a conversation, but people don't usually, go into a space like that. Yeah. So if it's in spaces that are extreme, even if let's say I get somebody that comes in and they've got anorexia and they are 30 kilos and they have extreme anxiety and the exposure therapy of trying to rebuild their physical and psychological health, that it's recommended at some point, not in the beginning, but at some point you start to have that conversation, right? Because that as the person is having to let go of the disorder, the anxiety peaks and it becomes uncontrollable. So I tend to look at it in a space like that. So we start to suggest that this might actually help to make it not so extreme so that your journey and working on it will be easier. Instead of you going up and down like this, it will be more even, right? So that would be in a space that you would introduce and that conversation and looking at it as a space of if you fall in the ocean and you don't have a life jacket, right? You're kicking and you're holding on. The medication is the life jacket. You can hold on to it so it keeps you afloat, but you still have to kick your legs. Right? You still have to do the work. But a lot of people, a lot of my patients are not on medication. And it's also depending on where you're at. And it should be a choice, right? If you know it's going to benefit you for whatever reason, and that's also based on a diagnostic, not just because, you can't sleep at night. The first thing is it's why can't you sleep, not here's a pill to make you sleep. So if you have a therapist who's too keen to throw something at you, change therapists. Because it should be explored before it becomes something that is needed.
Right. Well, that being said, I also feel like if anyone feels depressed or has anxiety, let's not put it all on the therapist, but you yourself are also equally as responsible to go and get help and talk to someone before you start self-medicating yourself too. And I only say that because I've been in that situation too, where I felt depressed and I was like, I'm going to take something to make me sleep. And the next thing you knew, I was hooked on something to make me sleep. And then I was like, well, if I had done the work and said, okay, I'm not feeling well, something is bothering me, I need to go talk to someone first before going ahead and self-medicating myself to think that this is how I'm going to feel better.
I would 100% advise
Gabby would have stopped me, but Gabby
not
wasn't around.
self-medicating in any capacity.
Right.
Because a lot of us have addictive behaviors, like
Yeah.
personalities,
Yeah.
right? So what happens if, somebody chooses to do that and then they're in a place where it's dangerous for them, right? So
Right.
knowing yourself, if you've also got that trait, it's advisable.
Stop self-medicating, guys.
Do not.
Go see a therapist. All right. So just to wrap this up before we get too in depth about self-medicating here, how accessible is it to get help? If you could just sum it up to end this episode on, what would you advise people to do if they start to feel, if it's anxious or depressed, or like what are the steps you think that they would need to take before they start to feel even worse?
Well, first, talk to the people you trust and support, and perhaps they have a recommendation of somebody you could talk to, or do your research. I think that's very important, is to ask the questions of what the experience
Ask
of
your
this.
therapist.
Yeah.
these questions.
What is your experience with this? How long have you been working? What is your clinical training? You're allowed to ask these kinds of questions because therapist is a very broad term. You've got counselors, you've got, clinical psychologists who are doctors, and you've got a counselor who maybe they got their education online, right?
There's a lot.
There's
by
a
the way.
lot.
Yeah.
And it's important that you have somebody that is properly clinically trained,
Right.
and has that experience as well as the professional experience. So it's okay for you to ask questions. You should be asking questions.
So you would suggest probably, in a way, interviewing and,
Correct.
interviewing because it's about you.
Yeah.
And you're interviewing your therapist and what
and
works for
also
you.
you can have the best psychologists in the world, but your personalities might not connect, right? Because not everybody is suited for everybody, no matter how good you are.
That is very true.
It's very important too, if the psychologist sees it's like, you know what, I'm not the right person for you. Let me find you somebody who is.
Right.
And that's a good therapist who is in a space that recognizes that this person needs something different from me.
Well, I myself, I had to go through a few because I realized that the match wasn't there. And essentially it's like building a relationship, right? Because you are going to be seeing this person however long, how many times a week or once a month or whatever. But yeah, that was very helpful. Dr. Gabrielle Tüscher. Am I saying it right?
Yes.
It was very, very amazing to have you here because I think
Thank
a lot
you
of
so
people
much for having me.
are wondering, they could be sitting at home thinking like, I'm not feeling well. What should I do? What are the steps to take? So I think this is a really important EP to put out there. And I do hope that everyone did get something from this podcast. I know that I definitely continue to work on myself every day. And the key to this EP is there's nothing shameful with getting a bit of help.
More people should do it.
Yeah. And don't wait till sometimes you don't have to have a problem.
Yeah, don't wait
go
for a
and talk to
crisis
somebody.
to talk to somebody.
Yeah. So get on it, guys. And thank you for listening to Let's Be Real with Ase Wang and Dr. Gabrielle Tüscher. Bye.
Bye.